Hello everyone. Our easy sketch videos, there'll be a series, and what they're about is learning to draw simple things in simple ways. And that is a fantastic foundation for learning to draw complex things in complex ways because they're based on each other. When you have learned to be able to see basic shapes and how they're put together in a basic object, you learn to see those basic shapes within more complicated objects. And the more that you draw, the more confidence you have in seeing them and drawing them until you can, instead of a birdhouse, draw a cathedral, let's say. So what we need for this class is something to draw with and something to draw in. And I have a 3H pencil here, which means the lead's a little harder than the school pencil and it doesn't smear as much and erases better. And I really like white erasers on the end of my pencil. This kind of drawing pencil doesn't come with anything on the end, so you are able to put these on, and you can get them by the bajillions. It's a white vinyl eraser. You can get them on Amazon very, very inexpensively. And I change mine out whenever it gets like dull, so to speak, because I want those corners to be able to correct. I always start drawing with a pencil. Some people just say dive in and whatever happens, but I create with my pencil. And it's the best. If it was the only art tool that I could have, this would be the one I would choose. Secondarily to that would be this, which it's made by a company called Westcott, a ruler company, and you can also get these for a couple bucks on Amazon. And it's a squares ruler. And a lot of us that are creative, we're not wonderful at using a regular ruler and counting 8ths and 16ths and so on. And so you can use a regular ruler all you want in these lessons, but this is a really right brain way to do things because you're counting big squares or little squares. And so I always have one of these around, and you'll see how I use it to make sure that I'm keeping something on the straight and narrow. So, and I have no script for these classes, and I'm playing it by ear, so I can screw up. And if I do, it'll be good for you to see anyway. A birdhouse is a house, and it's built like any other house out of a square and a triangle in most cases, or a rectangle and triangle. So the first thing is to draw a rectangle, and the most important part about any rectangle that you draw is that the two lines are two things. They are true vertical, which means perpendicular to the horizon and not going like this, and they are the same distance apart from each other at any point along the way. That's called parallel lines. It's crazy important in drawing. And a trick for drawing that is to get your first line and actually make sure that it's the same distance at both ends from the side of the paper. Then you know it's a true vertical and that you're not going to be guiding off of something that's not right in the first place, because that only gets worse. But anyway, once this is a true vertical, turn your book or however you want to do it so that you're like you're drawing below that line. And then you keep your eye on that line. Like when you caught a softball when you were young and they said, keep your eye on the ball. Instead of keeping your eye on this, keep your eye on this and move this pencil in a sketchy way and try to pretend this is an electric fence and you got to hang back that far and just watch this line and keep this line the same distance away from it. And the first few times you can do this, you can use a little squares ruler or a regular ruler to check that those lines are the same at top and bottom. Now, you close that at the top with a true horizontal line. Same thing, only now parallel to the horizon, not perpendicular to it. And the other side of the rectangle will also be a horizontal line, and it will be parallel to that. Now, that wasn't hard at all, was it? And if it was hard, erase it and do it again so it isn't hard. In fact, do it 12 times if you need to so it isn't hard, because this is so much a brick, a foundation brick for your drawing practice that you won't even believe it someday. So we make a house, we put a triangle on the top of it, and we want to make sure, again, that that triangle isn't going to wampus over to the side and so on. And so a way to look at that is to take this little guy, and it would have been really nice if it evenly divided, but I was just freehanding, so it didn't. But you see these two big squares and the heavy red line? You can see to center that in your rectangle. And what you want to find is the middle mark. All right, and then we're going to decide how tall a roof on our birdhouse we want. And that's totally arbitrary. It's whatever you want it to be, but you want it to be above, directly above that midpoint. And so I'm going to do this, and I have this heavy red line aligned with that, and I'm going to just follow up until and hold my pencil in place till I have a height I kind of like. And I don't know why, this is totally personal choice, but I decided that's where it should be. Okay, and now all we have to do is connect this and connect this, and we have the basis for a house. Now, any house. Could we have gone at this with a whole unstructured whatever? We could, and the house would be wonky. And if that's your thing, that's great. But our thing when we do easy sketches, we're going to draw it correctly. And then, once you know how to draw something correctly, that's when you get to go off and screw it up. All right, so sometimes in a house or a birdhouse, you have that line remaining, but we're not going to in our birdhouse. So we're going to get rid of this top line of the box. And we already have our basic structure now. We can make it, instead of a people house, make it a birdhouse. And we do that by putting in our birdhouse hole. And a smaller one below can represent a perch. Not all birdhouses have perches because it depends on the bird, but this can be a really bad thing for a predator to be able to sit on and try to attack whoever's in the house. We don't like that. Okay, we have our outside of our birdhouse. Now, do we want to hang our birdhouse from something up here, or do we want it on a pole? That's kind of something that is totally up to you. Either way, you're going to do it from that same center point. So I am going to do both. I would make a true vertical line, and I usually run it right off the page, because unless I'm drawing a tree branch to hang it from, which we might have time to look at, I'm not sure. And there's going to have to be something for that rope to connect to. So sometimes that's a ring or a loop of some kind. Now, if we're putting it on a pole, we still want to reference that midpoint. Same one as here, and here, and here. In fact, if you wanted to make sure these landed in the same place, you could have put a guideline right straight down here, just to make sure that those were in the middle. Okay, so our pole, we're going to put a line either side of that. And those two lines are going to be parallel to each other. Okay. So now we could get fancier. One of the ways I'm going to get fancier is I'm going to add some texture, some thickness to our roof. So I'm going to add a parallel line on each side of our roof to make it look like that is a board and not just a straight line. I am going to put some squiggly lines going down. I don't need that midpoint one anymore, but to look like wood, all you got to do is some squiggly lines. And now that's a wooden post. If it was a metal post, you could have just left it plain, and you can paint it with something. And now I want my birdhouse to be more fancy than this, and I can take that guideline out of the middle. But I'm not going to go truly nuts because this is a simple sketching thing. A lot of things you could do. You could put in slats. Okay, I'm going to tell you how to do that and then decide if I'm going to do that or not. The way you would do that successfully, okay, and this is a principle that you'll use a lot on windows and doors and gates and houses and stuff that's man-made and that's sort of man-made by certain rules. And one of those rules is that if this was going to be made of slats of wood, they would all be the same width, unless somebody made a, asymmetrical birdhouse for a reason. But anyway, we're going back to our center point for another guideline. And this guideline can stay if you're going to keep these slats. And I'm going to divide the birdhouse in half. Now, if I started making lines from one side to the other like this, what are the odds that they would end up even? They're not good odds. I would be sure to be disappointed. So what I'm going to do to make sure that this works is I've now divided it in half. And I'm going to divide each half in half. And again, these are parallel vertical lines. And you notice whenever I draw lines, I don't go like that. I do it very sketchy because as I'm drawing the line, if it's misplaced, my brain is going to tell me how to move it into place as we go along. Okay, so I'm dividing that in half and this side in half. And I can tell anyway that is too thick and more toward the one than the other. Okay, and again, our little squares ruler. Are we looking like, I'm going to say one slat so far is 2 little squares wide. And that's about true as you go across. Yeah. So far so good. We're pretty even. And is that enough slats for your birdhouse? You are the one to decide. Is it made out of really wide slats or is it made out of narrower ones? Okay, and mine, I want to be more narrow, and also I can just continue showing you this principle. So now what we would do is we would divide each of these sections in half. And at this point, it's pretty easy to eyeball where the center is here. And this is going to give it more of a elaborate look. It also works out, and if yours isn't like that, you might want to adjust it, but it works out like it's logical too, because the birdhouse hole, it wouldn't just barely overlap another slat because it was like drilled out of here. So we do that, and we do this. Okay, and that would give you this kind of a birdhouse. Now, I am thinking more of painting my birdhouse with something pretty. If you're not, go ahead and ink this in and decide whether you want it hanging too, or you could put an antenna on here, or a weather vane if you wanted to. I mean, there's all kinds of little things you can do. I'm just going to put a little moon. Don't ask me why, it just came to me. A little crescent moon, which is just a C backwards. But I'm thinking I might put flowers here. Because my thought is I could put a nice little blossom right here and some leaves. And that would be kind of pretty. Or I could keep it like this and put some leaves growing up from here. Or a couple of flowers growing up from here. I think I'm going to do that, okay? So flowers can be anything. Flowers can be a circle. Flowers can be a a tulip kind of shape. They can be all kinds of things, and I'm just wondering what kind. I want to do a very simplistic one. I'm going to start with the stem, and these aren't going to be very realistic, and that's okay. I'm going to start with a couple of stems of different heights, just because that'll be interesting, and it gives us more time to practice our parallel lines. Now, I've done this for so many billions of years that I'm watching this line while I draw it, but I don't have it turned so that it's the line above. I can do it backwards now. If you practice long enough, you'll be able to do it backwards. Woohoo, right? Okay, a stem, and then all flowers have some kind of center, and I start with them, and I just make a squiggly center, like a little cloud, like so. All right. And then I put petals around. And I'm not going to do this in a very complicated way. I'm going to do it in a very loose, very fun way. I mean, if you took each petal, you'd have daisies and everything, but I just, because we don't have a lot of time, I just want, like, just cartoony, designy, weird flowers. Okay, we got our flowers. And now we're going to add leaves to our flowers, and that's what's going to make this look a little less awkward, this space in here. I got to get rid of the rest of my hanger since it's not hanging. Okay, and so a leaf is really easy. A leaf is when you take a pair of parentheses, which you know how to do in your writing, and you join them together. Now, there's two ways that leaves are on stems, and one is opposing and one is alternating. And you want to keep it the same on the same stem or the same kind of flower. And because of my weird spacing, I'm not going to do the opposing, because what would happen is every time I put a leaf on one side, I had to put it on the other, and that is going to run into a visual mess here before too long. So this is a little exercise in just creative design. It's like, where do you want something to be? And as I look at this, I am seeing that I'm not happy with that big empty space. I'm going to add another flower here. Again, just organic. So now it's to choose where your leaves go. So I'm going to make these leaves pretty big. And I am going to make them alternate from one side to the other. And I'm not going to put a million of them because we want this kind of simplistic. But we also don't want them to overlap. So what I'm going to do here is just make one in that space. And another one here. And then this one, I'm going to add a leaf here. It's not going to be as big. They're not as big ever at the top as they are as they're older at the bottom. And you're just going to try and space them out so they don't fill too much space and they don't bang into each other. And so I think that's going to be the end of this one. And I might throw one over here and over here. Now you see why we would have been in a lot of trouble had we tried to have the pairs. So you can only really get away with that when you have a bunch of room and you're not staggering for interest. Okay, this little flower here and here. That's not going to interfere with anything we do here. See how easy it is to draw leaves when you think of them as parentheses. This guy we'll put here, and here, and here. And this we will put here, and here, and here. And we need a little something here. And just looking at this, I'm just going to do a little symmetry here. I'm going to make my post as wide as 2 of my slats, just because being off like that is a little goofy. All right, so I'm just going to make it wider, match up with that. And basically, that's our sketch of our birdhouse. So what do we do next? We put ink on it. I'm going to add a leaf over here, just in case you were feeling that was a little empty, like I was feeling. Now, I'm not going to lie to you, ink is the scariest part. Most often you want to use an indelible ink that watercolor's not going to smear, and so my favorite fine liners are Pit Pins by Faber-Castell, and they come in several different point sizes, and they're awesome, mostly because they just dry instantly. These are medium point. I think that's a little big. On a sketch like this, I would probably use what's called a small, and it's also a 0.3. However, if you are beginning with our little easy sketch lessons to learn how to draw, it's going to be a lot harder with ink than it is with a pencil, and mostly it's psychological because we know we can't undo our ink line. My hint, we have all these parallel lines, and when I ink something, some people feel opposite to this, but most people feel if the line is going away from you and you can see it, you're going to make the best line. You try not to pick the pen up because it's hard to put it back down in the same spot. And this could take practice. You might go in another page in the back of your book and practice. But I basically do something like this. It's not even a heavy ink line. And this is a real clean line. Now, if you're not opposed to sketchy, it can be easier on you. And if you're left-handed, I'm not, so I don't know the comfort zone, but wherever you can place your hand in your pen so that you can see the line you're drawing and the line next to it, you're going to be in good shape. Okay, and just ink in the rest of this. And you can watch if you want, or you can speed through this and not watch, or work on your own along with me. And here's our wooden pole. And here's our little wood mark. Sometimes a little loop is good, like a knot hole would be. Okay, that just indicates that that's wood. And then, and by the way, this will be dark inside of here. So you could do that with a little bit of hatching. Okay, and then I am just going to quickly go over and make my flowers happen. Just inking right over my pencil. You know, flowers can be just as goofy as you want because they're fantasy flowers anyways. This real time is getting a little boring for you, I bet. Okay, I'm going to make it darker right here in the shadow area of my wood. We give that a little bit of time to dry, and then we erase. When I'm going to erase a big area like this, I use a black non-crumb eraser. Some people use kneaded erasers, and I just can't. I don't know. I can't make them work, so I don't. This is, I will put a link in the description. This is an eraser that rolls the residue, if you will, up into a single piece. See that? So I always travel with these. If I'm in a hotel or an Airbnb or something, I mean, who wants to get eraser crumbs all over the carpet or the floor? And this way, in order to make this work right, you have to move slowly back and forth like this. And then it does roll up its crumbs into a little tail. And it's so much easier to gather and pick that up and get rid of it. So now we have finished our adorable little birdhouse, and the coloring part is the fun part, usually, I think. Well, it's all fun. But in these easy sketch videos, depending on the subject, I'm going to use different methods of coloring. You won't see any alcohol ink, but otherwise there are a lot of different mediums that I work with. I mostly work with watercolor. But today, I'm going to use a concept that I call line washing. And line washing is basically using outlines from a water-based marker or brush marker. And then you take either a water brush or a wet brush, and you'll see that intentionally you spread the color, but the lines will stay there on most markers. Some, real inexpensive ones will fade away the whole 9 yards, but you'll see what I mean when we use this one. This happens to be by Faber-Castell, and it's called Goldfaber Aqua. And you don't see them too much. I found mine at Michael's, and I bought a lot more online because I really like these. They have a fine tip, and they have a brush tip on the other end. Tombow markers are very similar to these. But I think the Tombow marker line blends away a little bit. Anyway, what I have is this, and I have a water brush, and I have a whole video on how to use water brushes. There's something that I really love, but you can just use a wet paintbrush instead if you like. So without further ado, the idea is to use line to apply some color. So I have an azure blue here, and I'm going to go ahead and go over, I'm staying inside here, but basically go over the lines that I did with ink. And they don't have to be perfect because you'll see why in a minute. But this is a lovely way to get a very interesting look that's just not a flat color wash. Okay, so I have all of my little, and that's bad, right? But there should be shadow there anyway. And then I'm gonna put a line up here because underneath this roof would be a shadow area. And so you'll see when we wet this that we'll have a little extra color up in that area. So that's all there is to the line part. And now we go to the wash part. And I'm going to make sure there's not too much water coming out of my water brush. And you just go in and you start doing this and you go, oh my goodness, isn't that beautiful, right? And you're just wetting the area, going right over the lines. and it's liquefying the color and spreading the color in a lovely way, but still leaving your lines to differentiate the slats in your birdhouse. And with some water-based markers, they will run just as much if they've been drying for a while. With others, not quite so much. And so here, we're working right away, and we're getting like the maximum blend. And if you keep going, you'll get rid of any of the like scribble lines you made. I'm going to turn the book to reach this better. I would like to spread the darker color in a little bit. And up here, I want to do a little shading. All right, so when you get to a place where you're not getting any run anymore, there's still a way to add shading back, and that is something called paletting. And what I'm going to do is I have a piece of plastic here that has a tooth to it. It's actually kind of a satin finish. And what I'm going to do is palette this same marker onto this plastic. And see, because the surface is rough, it sits there for you. And you can come back with your water brush and pick up paint just like it was a palette. And I'm doing that in order to add more shadow into the area under the roof and blend that out. And on both sides here. And your palette color, it doesn't last for a long time because there's not a lot on there. But I'm good because all I want to do really is very little additional color over here, just along the edge. Okay, if you are using a regular paintbrush, you may have to dip back in, but the water brush continues a feet of water coming out constantly out of the tip, and so you don't have to dip back in. But anyway, I like that blue for our birdhouse. Okay, for our pole, I'm going to test a couple of colors here. This is that's a good wood color. I like that. And this time, I'm going to apply the marker a little bit differently. I'm going to use the brush tip and put the color into this area. We already have shading and texture going on. So we're just looking for just some color that you can see through. And I'm going to bring back the water brush just to see if I can pick up a little light in there. Not right up here because I wanted shadow there. Okay, and the other place that may be a brown color like that would be our perch. And so I gotta make sure I open the right end of this. I'm just gonna want my small tip. And we're gonna just color that in. And again, I'm putting the line and then spreading the line. And that gives you a nice, range of value. I think I would like a real reddish or rust color for, maybe it is a rust roof on here. I'm not sure. Okay, this is kind of a rust color. It's a Venetian red. Yeah, it's very much a rust color. I am not sure whether I want to do this just as a solid stroke with my brush. I'm going to try that. Now, this is not a floppy brush. It's called a brush tip, but it's not floppy. It's pretty sturdy and actually made of fiber, I think. But yeah, it has a tip that's small enough to do this. And this isn't coming across very reddish rusty. I'm going to try going in there with my water brush again and see if I can pick up any color and lighten that a little bit. Yeah, I can get that a little lighter. we want to do our flowers. I want to make my moon up here a nice yellow, and probably use that yellow on the flowers as well. All right. And for the flower, because I'm going to add red to the center, I'm going to use the brush tip and fill in the entire flower at once, just to make life easy. If you do or you don't get it on the center of the flower, it's fine either way, because we are going to add, I think, a bright red center is what I am picturing. And there's our flowers, all being cool and yellow. Now, I'm not adding a background to this sketch. You know, some sketches, a background is a good thing. Some, it doesn't matter. And some, it's better. It's kind of this kind of look. And in this case, I'm liking this kind of look. And then I'm going to go in with a red and pop those flowers up just by adding red centers. Okay. Now this time we're not wetting it and making it spread, or we'd have just total orange flowers. So now we just have the leaves, and we can go after that in a number of ways. These are the kind of leaves that are really well made by the tip of a brush, but I don't know that these have enough flexibility to do that, and they don't quite. So you can pick a green marker and you can make a couple of marks to fill in. I'm gonna experiment and try a brush marker and see what a difference that might make. A real brush marker. Now, Zig, Real Brush, they make a lot of them. This one happens to be a Japanese brand called SAI, and they say it's the closest thing to a real paintbrush. But see, you're going to get a lot more of the ability to make a single stroke to color in your leaves. I'm not sure that I think that the green is intense enough, but I'm going to find out. Oh yeah, it's a nice sap or olive green, so I like it. And this is a truer watercolor, and so I am going to try lifting that a little bit, and I'm not going to use my water brush because it's too much water, so I am using a damped off number 2 round brush, and it's damp, and it's, you know, I got the excess off on there, so I could go in and see if I can lift from the middle of the leaf, and I can a little bit. And this is part of my style. I love the lifting and giving the dimension to a shape. And so we're just picking up a little bit of color so you get 2 tones in there. Now, of course, you can use 2 different greens if you want to. There's a lot of directions to go, but I like this. So rather than make you sit through it, I'm going to use that particular marker and finish my leaves. Okay, and so our simple birdhouse sketch is done. It's very airy and loose and light, and you can get a whole lot more detailed with it. And if you see anything that you want to enhance or strengthen, then this is the time it can be done. And I think I want my flowers a little more interesting, so I'm going to go to the thin end of that marker, and I'm just going to make little marks coming off the middle. They don't really line up with the edges, but just kind of indicate that those could be separate petals. So you can do that if you have this kind of flower. I mean, you might have made a cooler flower to start with. But I just think that this little touch gives more of a, I don't know, personality, maybe. And so I'm adding it to all of these guys. And while I'm thinking of it, I'm thinking that maybe I would like a little more personality for the stems too. And I might do that. But you can quit anytime that you're happy. Okay, I like that. But now my stems seem a little weak, you know, for the look of the rest of everything. And so I am going to find the right green. I have a pine green in the same marker family, and so I'm going to take the fine tip and just strengthen and greenify, if you will, these stems, because just the incline isn't giving them enough support. See the difference, right? I'll finish this side and we'll look at the difference between the two sides. Okay. Yeah, very definitely. I like the strength that comes from that. And I'm also thinking I want to make it this line blacker because it's an iron ring. And I want to blacken the inside of the birdhouse as well. So first, finish these stems. All right, and then I'm going to grab my fine liner again, and I still have the small here, but I can still strengthen this line. And then I'm going to strengthen the edge, because it would be a metal edge too, let's say, of our moon charm up there. So far, so good. And then I'm going to really intensify this inside darkness. And maybe add just a squiggle to make that look like it's wood as well. Okay, all done. You can add some background with colored pencil or something if you'd like. I would not try to get in here and make a background with anything wet because, as you recall, when we run into the line, we're going to get a wash coming out from it. But anyway, that's it for our Easy Sketch Birdhouse.